If you've ever wanted to take incredible photographs using nothing but your iPhone, an enormous part of that is the settings that you choose to shoot that photo with. And that's what we're gonna break down in this video. I'm gonna showcase some of the best iPhone camera settings for your new iPhone 16 and iPhone 16 Pro that you can use to take your photos from looking like this to something looking a little bit more like this. My name's Davey and I'm a professional photographer and videographer, and I also do a whole bunch of smartphone photography and mobile content creation. Before we get into the settings, I just wanna briefly talk about the iPhone. The iPhone I'm using today is the iPhone 16 Pro, and it's been my daily phone since this phone has come out. Because this is a new Pro model iPhone, some of the things that we're gonna be talking about today will just relate to the iPhone 16 Pro and some of the other Pro iterations of iPhones. But most of what we're gonna be talking about today is gonna be compatible with a bunch of iPhones, including older devices, so if you have an older iPhone, don't worry. So let's jump into the settings application. You're gonna scroll down until you find the camera settings. So the first few settings on this page actually relate to video, and I've covered that in a different video on my page, and that's all about iPhone videos. New to the iPhone 16s is the camera control button, and this lets you launch your camera quickly and take control of your settings. The first setting we have in this menu is Clean Preview. If you have this turned on, when you activate the camera control button, all of the other dials on your screen are going to disappear. I like to leave this on so that I'm focusing just on the camera controls that I'm controlling and I'm not distracted by anything else, but this is a personal preference. A little lower down, we have Launch Camera, and you can decide whether you want this as single press or double press. If you've had your iPhone 16 for a while now, you probably know whether you're accidentally pressing the camera control button or not, so choose accordingly. So I would recommend double click if you're accidentally opening camera control. I'm gonna leave mine on single click. And just below that, we're gonna have the option of what we actually want this camera control button to open. And in our case, it's gonna open the camera. Now, if you wanna fine tune the controls for this button, they can be found in Settings, Accessibility, and Camera Control. And in here, you can control pretty much anything that this button is going to do. You can change how hard or light you want it to be controlled, and even change the double press speed. So if we go back a page, we're faced with photographic styles. And again, this is a personal preference, and realistically, photographic styles is a topic for its own video. But essentially, this is the option to get incredible looking photos straight from your phone with basically filters applied right to your photos. It is a powerful feature, but right now let's just leave it on standard. As we keep scrolling down, let's tap on formats. And this is extremely important because this is where you control the actual file formats for the photos you're gonna be taking. And also things like resolution, which is of course massively important when we're talking about iPhone photography because of the small sensors on these phones. So the first option that we see is camera capture, and we're gonna set this to high efficiency. The reason we're gonna have this in high efficiency is that our files are going to be smaller and they're going to be compatible with most devices. A second ago, we were talking about photographic styles for your images, and if you want to change or add a photographic style to your images later, you need to make sure this option is in high efficiency. The next option is photo capture, and I believe this option only appears on the iPhone 14 Pro and newer models. But you can tap in to check that out, and this allows you to set the kind of default resolution you want for your images. Let's leave this at 24 megapixels because it's gonna give you additional detail in your photos. But if you are concerned about space, you can reduce this to 12 megapixels. The next control here is also very important. This is where the Pro RAW and resolution controls are, and this is what is going to allow us to shoot Apple RAW on our iPhones. So we wanna make sure this is left on, and inside this menu, let's choose Pro RAW because this is going to be the highest resolution of image. In terms of Pro RAW format, let's choose JPEG XL Lossy because this is going to provide us with the largest resolution of image with the smallest file size. So let's head back to the main camera setting, and up next, we have Preserve Settings. So what this is going to allow us to do is have any of these options that are turned on within the settings menu to not be reset every single time you quit and reopen the camera. So obviously this can be really, really useful. Play around with the settings in this menu. It's gonna be a personal preference. I like to leave on camera mode, creative controls, depth control, exposure adjustments, portrait, zoom, and live photo. So back to the menu before, here's a couple more general options. You can use the volume up button on the side of your phone for burst. I rarely use the burst feature on my phone, and now that there's a camera control button, I find that I don't go back through and look at my burst photos, so I just leave that off. And if there's gonna be a rare opportunity that we need the burst, we know where to turn it on now. So these next two settings don't really have anything to do with photography, but I leave them on because they're just helpful. And that's scan the QR codes and show detected text. This next option is about a shared library, and again, that's a whole video on its own, so we're just gonna skip over that for right now. These settings under composition are actually some of my favorites, and they're gonna massively help you out in how you take your images. I would always suggest that you leave the grid option turned on. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna overlay a grid onto your photo camera screen for when you're shooting. This will help you practice basic photo composition on your iPhone camera, and it's a good setting for everybody in my opinion. In short, the way that this grid works is that if you want a cleanly composed image, place your subject on one of the intersections of the grid or on one of the lines. And that's of course if you're not centering your subject. There's also an option for a level indicator to show that your phone is level while you're taking photos, and I think this is very handy so you don't need to correct this later in editing. I also like to leave on view outside the frame, and that way I can see if moving closer or further away from my subject includes more or less of the details that I want in my photo. So Fusion Camera, this is where you can pick what lenses you want available when you're taking photos. I leave this on, and I like my default lens to be 24mm because this is the widest focal length on this wide main camera. Let's leave on portraits in photo mode. This lets you change your regular photos to portrait photos, you know, the ones with the beautiful background blur, later on if you do choose that you want this. Prioritize faster shooting is a wicked option. I don't know how it works, just leave it on because you're not gonna miss the shot this way. Let's leave on lens correction so we don't get any weird vignetting or distortion on our lenses. Let's also leave on macro control so that no matter how close you put your phone to a subject, there's gonna be a higher probability that it can get focus. Okay, so enough with the settings. Let's jump into the iPhone camera app and let's briefly walk you through some of the most important settings within the app itself while we're actually shooting photos. So once we're in the camera app, let's tap this little arrow at the top and it's gonna bring up all of the controls at the bottom of the screen. This is where we have our flash. By tapping it, we can turn it on or off. And by having it off, it will actually enable night mode, which is this icon that you're seeing right here. So right now, the phone thinks that it's really, really dark in here. And if I make it a little bit brighter, you can see that that night mode is going to switch off. This little dotted circle is the option to turn on or off live photos. I'm more of a traditional photographer and tend to leave this off, but occasionally I'm switching it on if I'm shooting a child or an animal or a group of people that is unpredictable. Essentially, your camera will just shoot a short video and I can choose a photo from that video afterwards. Or I can loop the video, or I can turn it into a long exposure later. Next option here is the option for photographic styles, and again, a topic for another video, but this is where you can turn them on or off or cycle through them. Next is the aspect ratio, and you can choose between 1:1, 16:9, or 4:3, and essentially this is just the frame that your camera is seeing. I like to leave mine in 4:3, which is the original aspect ratio, and you can crop to the other aspect ratios from this one if you want to later. This next option is where you can manually control how bright or dark your image is gonna be. When you're shooting your photos, you can tap on your subject and you can drag up and down, but when you turn your phone to a different subject, that is going to reset. This option is gonna let you choose how bright or dark you want your image, no matter where you turn your camera. I'm gonna set mine to -0.3 because I find that the iPhone slightly overexposes images a little bit, and I like to make it on default a little bit darker. So this looks like it's all of the controls, but it's not. If you slide over, we've got a couple more options. We've got timer, and when you select this, you can add a delay from when you press the shutter button to when the image is taken. If you're wondering why you're pressing the shutter and nothing is happening, and the photo gets taken later, this is probably why. For the time being, let's leave this guy off. If you have shared library on, there's gonna be an option here to take photos to share to your shared library or to your personal. If not, you probably won't see this option. So to get rid of these options, we can press the little arrow at the top, or we can swipe up. And of course we have other photography modes along the bottom. I like to stay in photo mode unless you're shooting something specific like a panorama or a time lapse. You can see over here, this is the macro button that appears when we get near to objects, and we can toggle it if we want it on or off. Now, if you want to take the highest quality images possible, you're going to want to press this Pro Max button at the top. And by doing this, you can shoot the most professional image format on your iPhone. These are called RAW files, and these are much larger than JPEGs, and they're also more data intensive, but it actually allows you to edit the style and basically anything you want about your photo after taking it to achieve a look that you may have not got straight out of camera. This is actually a workflow that is very, very common for professional photographers, and as one myself, I like to shoot raw photos for all of my photo jobs. When I'm looking to capture the best photo that I can from my iPhone, this is when I turn the setting on. But if I'm just shooting really casually, maybe I'm around town taking photos, I'll just leave this in JPEG, and this is way less file intensive and it's gonna save you a lot of storage. I hope this was a helpful overview for what settings to change to get the best photos from your iPhone. If you're interested in changing video settings to get the best videos out of your phone, I'll link a video for that right here. My name's Davey, and thanks for letting me spill the gravy. We'll see you in the next one.